If I've learned anything from therapy, it's that healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself from what was never yours to carry. Hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to another episode of Pretty Intentional, the podcast where beauty, lifestyle, and personal growth intersect. I'm your host, Candice Coleman, and here we have real conversations about everything from self-care and confidence to faith, friendships, and leveling up in life. In the last episode, we talked about unlocking God's favor through the trifecta of faith, patience, and obedience. If you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to that episode. And while that episode was laced with scripture and biblical references, I just want to let you know and assure you that I have balance. I by no means am a super religious person, nor will I beat you over the head with Bible. I'm not a fire and brimstone type of person. But I am definitely a good mix of spirit, scripture, stones, and sage. Some folks are turned off by that, and that's okay. I just don't think as children of the diaspora, we should ignore the practices of our ancestors, and they got them that far for a reason. And I'm also coming from extensive life experiences and how I've benefited from them all. I'm here for spirit. I'm also here for science. But one of the best things God gave us was therapy. And finding a therapist was one of the best things I've ever done in life. I am someone who is very self-aware. I self-regulate often. I go inward and I try to figure things out. But Mother's Day of 2018 broke me. I thought I had everything under control. And that weekend, years of pain and loss came crashing down and I snapped. And that's what finally sent me to therapy. I was finding myself constantly triggered by mundane things. I was angry. I was dealing with a lot of trauma and bottling up and suppressing a lot of things. Some trauma I was able to identify, others I was not. And I felt as though I was completely losing control of myself. And I knew it wasn't like my spiritual life or my faith that was being tested. I knew it wasn't that. I had just completed maybe like a year prior to that. I completed an 18-month-long discipleship program at my church. I was studying the Bible, applying things to my life. So I knew it wasn't that. And I know there are a number of Christians who act like, they don't believe in therapy and all you need is Jesus. And I'm here to tell you, God gave us therapy. Go sit on the couch and talk to the lady. Because everyone can benefit from talking to a therapist. And most of us who are in therapy, we're in therapy to deal with people in our lives who refuse to go to therapy. Children of narcissistic parents, this one's for you. And I don't know about you, but I'm personally having a hard time after being in therapy for 8 years at this point. I'm having a hard time dealing with friends who won't go to therapy or think that they don't need therapy. I'm having a hard time relating. I'm having a hard time with dealing. And just there's no shame in therapy. It's a resource that is available to you and you should utilize it. But back to that weekend, Mother's Day weekend, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And the spiral sent me straight into therapy. Mother's Day was always never a weekend that I really looked forward to or even loved. To me, it was a weekend that people gushed about their mothers, what their mothers taught them, how their mom was their best friend. And I personally didn't have that. My mother and I were not best friends. We didn't have the best relationship, despite what a lot of people thought. And quite frankly, as the oldest and the only girl, to me that kind of sucked. But I sucked it up and I toughed it up and I just pushed through. So every year I would hide on Mother's Day weekend, but I would always outwardly celebrate my friends. I was never outwardly sulking or sad. I kept my feelings to myself. Because one thing about me, I'm never going to take away from your moment or your feelings of joy. That will never be me. I'm never jealous. It's never going to be that. But for me, it was just the second Sunday in May. And I would have my little feelings to myself. And one thing that my father always said when I was growing up was, you know, no one really cares. Like, don't complain because no one really cares how you feel or someone else has it worse. While I understood what he was saying, it's not the best thing to tell a young girl whose feelings would not be validated. Needless to say, that advice was not that great for me because it led me into decades of me suppressing my feelings, thinking that no one gave a fuck. So while I knew I wasn't alone in the feelings that I felt around Mother's Day in that weekend, whether you lost your mom, you were longing to be a mom, you didn't have a great relationship with your mom, or you lost a child, there were so many reasons that someone would not enjoy the weekend, the day, or the month of May. For me, as someone who was desiring motherhood at that point, it kind of got to a point where I was telling myself that I didn't want children anymore based upon the relationship that I had with my mom at that time. And then if I was teetering with the idea of children, then it was saying that I didn't want a girl. I did not want a daughter out of the sheer fear of perpetuating the cycle of poor mother-daughter relationships. Now, again, I'm someone who's introspective and I rationalize things and I understand things. I knew that my relationship with my mom was something that she inherited from her relationship with her mother, who inherited that from her mother. I knew that this was something generational, and I knew it was something that was going to stop with me. The generational curse was going to stop with me, period. But that year, everything that I had been suppressing came out. I was 33. I wasn't a mother yet. I was desiring motherhood. I had just had my third miscarriage. I didn't know if I would even be able to have children as a result of endometriosis, polyps, fibroids. People were ignorantly just asking me when I was going to have a baby. And I just wanted to spend time with my mom that weekend. I thought that that was going to be the weekend to turn things around. And I remember going to call her to spend time with her. And she was gone, basically being a mom to someone else. And I fucking lost it. But that moment showed me I couldn't carry everything on my own anymore. And I needed someone to help me unpack it all. So in finding my therapist, I was beyond lucky. It was perfectly aligned. And she's the perfect match for me. And in finding her, I simply was in the hair salon. So shout out to the Black salon experience. And this is why community matters. I simply overheard my stylist talking about her experience going to a therapist. So shout out to you, Tania. Now, I vividly remember that day. I was in a mood. I was in a funk. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but I vividly remember I was in such a mood that I didn't even want to talk in the salon. There were other clients in there, and Tania was talking about her experience, and I was just to myself and just listening. But as she was talking about it, I just felt this rising up in my body, and I was just like, give me her number. And she said, oh, yeah, sure. And I was like, no, I don't think you understand. Give me her number. And I harassed Tania for a couple of weeks until I got the therapist number, and I immediately reached out. Like, there was no nervousness. Like, I knew I needed it. I was ready to do the work. So while I was ready to shop around for a therapist to make sure I had the right connection and rapport, I'm grateful that I did get the perfect match right away. So for those of you who may be looking for a therapist, don't feel guilty about shopping around and finding the perfect fit for you. And if you're looking for a therapist, I would say first ask your friends. See if they have someone that they can recommend, or honestly, if you start seeing a change in your friends and then they mention therapy and you're like, oh, they're changing for the better, ask for the referral because it probably works. Also, make sure check through your health insurance portal and find a therapist near you. And I think there's online things such as BetterHelp. I personally have not used them, but I know some people who have, and they've had good experiences. So, but if you're thinking about doing therapy and you don't know where to start, after 8 years of me doing therapy, I have some things I can share with you. So let's break it down. The first thing is be ready. If you're thinking about starting therapy, I need you to be ready. You want to be ready and acknowledge the fact that you even need the help, but not necessarily in an immediate crisis. Like there wasn't something dire going on when I started, but I was aware enough to know that I needed help. There wasn't anything really traumatic at the moment. So because I wasn't in an immediate crisis, I was completely disarmed and I was just ready to do the work on my own. And like the prophet Project Pat told us, you can't save hoes that don't want to be saved. I was ready to save myself, right? You have to want it because it really comes down to, ho, is you cool? And the answer is, you're not. At that point, I was carrying so much and I spent so many years trying to be strong. And the one thing my therapist told me that stuck with me was something that her grandmother shared with her. And she said, baby, I don't want to be strong. Look for all the strong women. They're dead. Stress will kill you. Carrying shit that's not yours will kill you. Go talk to the lady and lighten your load, okay? The second thing is have a set goal. Really ask yourself, what is your desired outcome from therapy? On my very first session, my therapist asked me why I was there, and I immediately knew the answer. I told her not only did I need to pinpoint my triggers, because I didn't like the lack of emotional control, that I wanted to get married and have children, and I refused to take generational curses with me. And she said, oh, well, baby, you're in the right place. So having a clear goal for your therapy outcome will not only help you, but help your therapist get down to the nitty gritty so you all know what you're working towards and what layers of the onion you're going to peel back. That lets your therapist know what to expect. And I will be honest, if you don't know what it is what your goal is, if it's just, I just need help, but I don't know what to pinpoint, your therapist should be able to help you out with that. Be honest. Be honest with yourself. But more importantly, please, 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 please be honest with your therapist. They cannot help you if you are lying. Nothing is off limits. There is no judgment. And just like any other medical professional, they can't properly address and assess your issues and your symptoms if you're hiding. So be open, let them peel back the layers, and just know that you're doing yourself a disservice by not being open and honest in therapy. Because if you're not going to do that, you're basically just paying $90 an hour to yap and talk shit, and you could have just done that with your girls at brunch or girls' night in. And no shade to sharing and talking with your friends, but they're not licensed, so go talk to the lady. The next thing, be committed and do the work. You need to be committed to the process of therapy because it's definitely a journey and it's not an easy one and it's not linear. It's definitely up and down. Many things are going to surface and that shit is not always going to feel great. I've been at it for almost 8 years now. In some sessions, I would be left feeling light and laughing and feeling good and aligned, and others would be so heavy, I would be mentally drained for days. When I first started therapy, I would go on Thursdays and I would be her last client. And because we had no one after me, we would run over and not even realize how long it had been. So my appointments would be like at 6:30. I remember the latest I got out was like 1:30 in the morning. I know, insane, right? The bill was hefty, but in the beginning I was going every single week because we had a lot of shit to unpack. And then I was able to go every other week and then maybe once a month and then like quarterly check-ins. So I may not talk to her as often as I used to, but I'll still schedule some routine appointments just to check in and make sure I'm okay. I like to call them my little tune-ups. It's just like getting an oil change. So after so many miles, I'll be like, all right, I've been using my tools, but let me just, little routine maintenance and service. So I'll use my tools, but whenever I feel off, I'll, call her and check in. But as you go through the journey and doing the work, I just encourage you to just keep pushing through the pain because it's not always going to be easy. And you're going to have homework assignments, and it is best that you do them. Trust me. And I will share with you something that my therapist said. She said that clients are actually better at doing their homework, and they're actually better patients because they don't want to be there. So they're really focused on just doing the work and getting the fuck out of there. She said we be bullshitting. So ladies, don't let men beat us in therapy so then they can then weaponize it against us. So do your homework. Trust me. All right, so one of the best assignments that I had was I had to ask my friends a question. We were assessing me asking for help, I believe, and how I show up for other people. And I was supposed to just be asking my friends how it is that they see me as how they see me as a friend and what makes me a good friend. But the assignment was so eye-opening because it really showed me my lack of or my inability to ask people for help, because everyone said the same exact thing. And I asked different groups of friends, and everyone said the same exact thing, that I'm a solid friend. I always show up. It doesn't matter if it's for them, their family, their children. I'm solid. I'm a no matter what, no matter where. And then everyone said, but. And everyone's but was the same thing. But we wish we knew how to show up for you the same way you show up for us. So that was an eye-opening thing for me to realize that people wanted to be there for me, but they didn't know how. And I always felt that I didn't have anybody there, but people wanted to be there, but they didn't know how to do it. So when you hear me say, articulate to people what it is that you need, I have learned this through practice that, and you may not know right away because it took me a long time to even figure out how to articulate what it is that I need. But as I've shared before, that was one of the reasons why when I was diagnosed with cancer, I knew that I couldn't hide and I had to immediately articulate to my village what I needed. But because of that, that's why I was able to do that. The next thing I want you to do is grieve the person you were. I say grieve the person you were because as we're going into therapy with a goal in mind, we're almost always coming out of it a different person. Going through this journey and learning more about yourself, you're going to need to grieve the person that you used to be. Realizing that the previous person may have suited you for a particular season in your life, but that they're no longer needed. We're getting out of survival mode. We're learning how to flourish. And that person that was fighting for you and masking for you before, you don't need her anymore. So just to recap, in looking for a therapist and starting your journey of healing, remember, be ready, because healing isn't just for crisis moments. Have a set goal. Therapy is most effective when you know what you want from it. Be honest, because your therapist can't help you if you're not real with them. Be committed and do the work. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth it. And grieve the old you, because growth means letting go of who you used to be. If I've learned anything from therapy, it's that healing isn't about fixing yourself. It's about freeing yourself from what was never yours to carry. So I hope this encourages you to take the step that you've been considering for therapy. If you're already in therapy, maybe just reassessing how you're approaching therapy. But just remember that healing is a process and that you are not alone. and go talk to the lady. Thanks for joining me for another episode of Pretty Intentional. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and rate and leave a comment on Apple and Spotify. You can follow me at Candice O Beauty on all platforms, and be sure to follow at Pretty Intentional as well. Remember, being intentional isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for yourself and your journey. Until next time, stay true to yourself, live with purpose, and as always, keep it pretty intentional.